All right, so welcome to Lecture 7. I'm just going to be going through a little bit more about baselining, and then we're going to move into COPES questions, which is something that you're going to have to do for your final project. So just a reminder again, talked about this in the last video, but baselining is essentially a systematic collection of information on the client's problem. So what would reasonably be expected to occur if we had not stepped in. So this can be done retrospectively, so asking somebody to think back over the past 2 weeks and what's their problem behavior been like as far as they can remember. So maybe for your project, if you're trying to increase the number of minutes exercise per week, you could try to think back, how many minutes did I exercise yesterday, how many minutes did I exercise the day before? Or more scientifically approach would be to delay the intervention for 2 weeks and then start collecting data right away. So maybe before you step in and did whatever your intervention package is going to be, trying to do a baseline of measuring number of minutes spent exercising for this week, for next week, and then 2 weeks from now implementing your intervention. So back to our big picture. We've already come up with a goals table, operationally defined problems, looked at different ways to measure the problem. Now we're going to get into a little bit more about single system designs and experimental designs. So you might be thinking, what is a case study and how is that different than a single system design? So case studies, unlike single system designs, don't make planned comparisons. So you're not really trying to look at a baseline versus an intervention. You're most likely just implementing the intervention right away. There's no comparison of A versus B, or like experimental research, one group versus another. A case study is just one person, one intervention, and you're not really doing any comparisons. But the A-B design is really the workhorse of single system designs, and what that means is that A-B essentially allows the practitioner to monitor and evaluate at the same time. So we can compare their baseline to their intervention phase and see if there's any real differences between the two. But an important limitation to point out here is that with an A-B design, we don't really have causality. So what do you think that might mean? Let's say that during their baseline, their depression score was really, really high, if that's what we're trying to measure. And then when we started our intervention, their depression got even higher. Does that mean that we're necessarily an awful clinician? Well, not necessarily. Let's say that we started our intervention at the time that they lost their job. Maybe it has nothing to do with what we're doing. Maybe it's this third variable that has, just caused their depression scores to go high. But the flip side of that, let's say that we started working with somebody in the middle of winter and we're doing a baseline. And then during our intervention phase, their depression score was really, really low. But it also happened to be summer and they're getting a break. It looks like we're an awesome clinician or that our intervention is working great, but maybe it just has to do more with the sun, right? Or maybe just school is stressing them out. So with the A-B designs, all that we can do is say that the intervention was associated with some type of change, but we can't necessarily say that it caused any change. I know that seems like a cop-out, but I would encourage you to look at this YouTube video to kind of get an idea of the difference between correlation and causation, because that's Research 101 and something that you should be really familiar with. And it's kind of a fun video too. So experimental single system designs. This is fortunately not anything you're going to be doing for this course, but just so that you're aware of them, because this is something that people will do in practice, and sometimes it even occurs naturally without them planning it. So there's several types of experimental single system designs, but one of the most common ones are A-B, A-B. So this would be an intervention and a baseline, and then maybe another intervention. So with an A-B design, A would be their first baseline, B would be the first intervention, and then A again could be the maintenance phase. It could be a time where they stop coming in. Maybe they're just taking a break from meeting with you, and then B is picking up the intervention again. And by doing something like this, we can really get at what caused the client's problem to change. So let's say that during both of the A phases, their depression was really, really peaked, and during both of the B phases, their depression was really, really low. By doing the second baseline, we can say that every time we're doing our intervention, their depression gets really, really low. So it couldn't be this third variable, because we can see repeatedly that every time that our intervention steps in, their depression scores go way down. So one of the limitations of doing this is, even though it can show causality, it's kind of cumbersome to plan out an intervention for this, and also it's kind of unethical in sometimes. So if an intervention is working and we said, well, you know what, we're not sure if it's really the intervention, it could be a placebo or something else, right? So we're just going to take it away. Problem with doing that is that's kind of unethical, right? But sometimes that this occurs when somebody just stops coming for a session for a while, or maybe you're going to be doing a maintenance phase and it just occurs naturally, right? So we're not really taking away the intervention. We're just stopping measuring for a while. So you might be thinking that, how am I going to go about introducing this to a client? And trust me, when you're beginning with this, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable because you've never done it before, they've never done it before. But it's important that everybody's on the same page and understanding it. And they're really simple, but at the same time, you need to introduce this to your client in a way that they can understand. So introduce them to the idea of measurement, concepts of measuring their target behavior and how that can improve the outcomes. Introducing the client to practice evaluation, so you can share your ideas of what you're trying to measure, but also kind of hearing their feedback too, because the more that they're feeling that they're heard and the more that they feel that they're invested in, that they can choose what's going on, the chances are that they're going to be more likely to change because they're invested in the process now. And this fact gathering phase also helps the practitioner to build a plan of action and come up with a better idea for an intervention. And so maybe just one last thought, in single system design, what's the independent variable? The independent variable is what's being manipulated. And is it the client's problem or their goal? So it would be the intervention, because the intervention is what's being introduced here, and that's going to change the dependent variable of the client's problem.